So I was just sent this by Post, and it's a set of headphones by FiiO. FiiO likes to make IEMs, sometimes they make headphones, sometimes they make amps and DACs and whatnot. But today, I guess we're looking at headphones. These seem to be open back. Well, I guess we're going to find out, right? Oh, it's a mighty big box, and well, I guess there's our headphones. Ooh, that feels nice. Right out the box, we got this bag and some ear pads, replacement ear pads, which is good to see because this means it's easy to replace them. Seeing as these is their more soft-bound, velour-y kind of ear pads, I'm assuming what's on the headphones right now are their leather pads. These should click on and off, so that's good to see, but let's see what else is inside this bag here. Taking out the bag, we're already off to a pretty nice start. We got a really nice box, a carrying case for it, a little plastic thing. I'm just going to keep it on there because this is a loaner unit. I got to give it back. I can't keep it. And, yeah, pretty interesting case to let you hold it up here. Nice diagonal. I kind of like that interesting design, but, you know, that's not what we're here for. We're here for headphones and if they're good for gaming. So, ooh, here are the headphones. What else do we got in here? The cable, and looks like we got a few accessories for audiophiles in particular. So, if you're an audiophile, you're gonna get some adapters. So, you got this XLR kind of adapter in case you're using a balanced amp and DAC and whatnot. And same, you got a 3.25-inch adapter, a 4.4mm. These are all the adapters for audiophiles, because you'll find these on like higher end amps and DACs and whatnot. So, that's nice to see. That would mean that this cable, yep, uses a 3.5mm jack to plug into all those bits, and judging by from the looks of it, yep, 2.5mm jacks for plugging into your headphones. This cable itself is pretty weighty. It's thick and braided, and I like that. Let's unravel this guy. Ooh, it's an internal braid with cording to protect the braid. I do like that. This is a very, very long cable. The length is, yeah, oh yeah, this is definitely more for audiophiles than anything else, but we're going to use it for gaming anyway, so it's a very long cable. They're this long. I might have it on screen. I'll edit it in later, but here it is. That's how long it is. But, you know, being an audiophile kind of cable, I expect it to be long, so that makes sense. The braiding is nice. The cording is nice. It is definitely 100% durable. Splitter looks good. Nice and solid. Splits into two fat, long, thick, and to plug straight into your headphones, yeah. Now, as for the headphones themselves, it looks like it's going for an nearly all metal build. Got that suspension band for comfort. This is my preferred type of, like, adjustment. A lot of people like, you know, the clickety-clickety stuff for gaming stuff, but I think this style is far more comfortable. The way it sits in your head, automatically adjusts with a band. And it feels pretty durable. Looks like you won't be too worried about getting this hurt. And design-wise, man, that's a blast from the past. This reminds me of like those older headphones, usually out of plastic, that you would find in like a Radio Shack, or if you were from the area of Radio Shack. But basically, a lot of electronic stores had this kind of design, so I don't know if I like it or not. I kind of do. And it seems that these are open back, so we'll try them out and see how these guys sound. But first, how do they fit, right? These seem to be like over ears, and well, oh yeah, they are over ears. I will say I have kind of like largish ears from the top and bottom, so I can kind of feel the top, like the very tips of my ear, from the very tip and top of my ear to like the bottom of my lobe, touching the pads just ever so slightly. But after, like, you know, this is actually me paying attention to it. After I like let go of my hands and don't think about it, which doesn't take long, I don't feel them anymore. So pretty good. I'm glad that my ears don't touch the drivers on the inside, so there's ample space there. It feels light on the head despite being like, you know, all being made of metal entirely. So yeah, I did mention I do like the suspension design for that comfort. Adjusts pretty well. I think this is a good long wearing headset, or well, excuse me, headphone, because, you know, no built-in mic. And yeah, I do like how these feel so far, but me personally, I like using, like, you know, these more clothy kind of, I believe, kind of velour like ear pads. They're I guess, I wonder if they are velour or not. I'll double check on that. This is what they're made of. I'm gonna edit that in. Just gonna right there. They're made of that. But let's try them out. All right, in theory they should just pop right off, right? Oh yeah. A little scary because you need a little bit of firmness, and yeah, not bad. While I'm at it, you can actually see the little driver in there. That's kind of pretty, but we're gonna have to cover that thing up and, you know, put the pad on. So there's that. Design-wise, it makes me think of my favorite headphone, which is the AudioQuest Night Owl, which I still use. It's got a similar system for snapping on and off, though these are like circular pads. I prefer like those D-shaped pads for the ears, but hey, considering what it is, it's not bad. Ooh, yeah. I'm just used to this type of pad more. It's far more comfortable. I like this a lot. And, you know, this material is known to, like, introduce a little bit more bass, so that might be also why I like these pads. But, you know, when it comes to headphones, pad preference and materials does affect, like, your sound a bit. Yeah, let's probably see how these guys sound and how about the game. So maybe we'll test it out a little bit. All right, now here's the part where I try to tell you guys that I'm gonna try to keep this short by not going too much into the audiophile stuff. And I really am trying, but I end up failing because I talk too much about the audiophile stuff before I get into gaming, because I still think it's important. But, you know, whatever, I'll try my best. Let's see how it goes. So the sound of these guys is using the it's got the Harman Kardon kind of like sound, so you're expecting a little bit of warmth, a very gentle V, and it's unexpected for me because I found that a lot of earbuds and headphones these days try to go along those lines because it works well with a lot of people. It's a very enjoyable, pleasurable sound. However, I will note that using the earpads does change the sound a little bit. This gentle, warm V, so there's a little bit more bass, a little bit more highs, slight recession to mids, is a little different on these guys. I don't think the mids are all that recessed. The highs and the lows don't really shout over them as much as one would expect out of a V shape, because the V here is very gentle. What happens with the earpads though, with the protein leather pads, the bass on these guys becomes more neutral, and I will say it does lose some of that impact. So the feel of the bass won't be as strong if you're going to be using the protein leather pads. Feel less of it, feels a little bit neutral, kind of brings out the mids a little bit more, but just a teeny bit. And kind of like the website says, it does say that the soundstage will be larger with these guys. I don't know if I believe that entirely. I struggled to find them being larger with either of the pads. I felt they were pretty big for both, but what I did find was a difference in weight. With the suede pads, you get more weight in your bass. You get more feel in it, and I personally enjoy these more because I just like a funner sound, and I like to feel my bass more. I will say that the bass isn't the most incredible bass. It doesn't have the greatest reach, so sub bass isn't the best, not the greatest deepest pull, because I like dark sounds, but in place it does have a pretty decent punch, and occasionally there is a good growl at that low end when you're like in those ranges, so it's not bad. It's a very, very clean bass. It's a clear bass. But that aside, moving on to the mid-range, overall, regardless of which pads you used, I found them both to be really clean, really clear. Lots of details in here. It was almost analytical. I wouldn't say it was like crazy. It wasn't like 100% analytical, but it's slowly kind of getting there. There's a lot of space between the sounds, and this has in part to do with like the large sound stage and the way it handled that sound, giving it a lot of like good sound separation, which was really, really good. So mids, very good. Personally, I do think the added weight in the bass regions also affected the mids a bit, so I felt the suede pads were nicer for the mids in my opinion. That's just because I like the weight added to the mids, but if you want to be more, I guess, analytical and you're okay with losing a little bit of that weight in the sound, then these guys I think do a better job at like bringing out those extra details here and there. There, let's get into the highs. The highs, pretty clean, relatively clear. I don't know if they were always the best. They presented a lot of detail. They're relatively bright, but sometimes it felt a wee bit harsh, just a teeny bit here and there if a lot of it was going on. But overall, that didn't happen too much, so it was still pretty clean and clear. I wouldn't say they were super bright, but these things do get a little too bright sometimes, I think, for my taste, but not to the point where it shrieked and hurt my ears, which is good. So the brightness on these guys I can handle really well, so that's a plus in my book. Now, as for the soundstage, as you can imagine, it's really good because they are open back, and as you can expect, as I mentioned before, it's got a really large stage, and I do like that. A lot of width, a lot of depth, a lot of room to work with. Height was just okay, but definitely a lot better than IEM's for the most part. I think there was some degree of height, but it still wasn't very good. Also, depth behind me wasn't the greatest, as I found out when I was playing competitive shooters, which I'll get to in a little bit. Now, that said, with this large stage, I do think it had a good degree of sound separation. The airiness you get from the open back design does allow there to be a sense of space between sounds. As for like the imaging, I think it was really good. I don't think it was perfect, but I still think it was pretty good for what it was. I just think it could be a little bit better, but even then, for what it was really great. Like when using it for competitive shooters, sounds were where they needed to be for the most part, and that is good and bad at the same time. Because of this open back design, this larger stage, you get a more realistic sound. That could be a problem in a competitive shooter, where having a smaller stage could give you an edge, because faraway sounds will come to you a lot faster. You'll notice them sooner because they're a little bit louder. On these guys, because it gives you more realistic representation, those faraway sounds are going to be hard to hear like they would be realistically, because it's hard to hear faraway sounds. So you really got to pay attention to those sounds. And because of that situation and the tuning and whatnot of the sound currently with the sound situation we have here, interestingly, I actually found that I did better using the suede pads versus the protein leather pads because of the sound information given to me by the bass and the weight of the sound from these pads. The protein leather pads, I think, just took too much away from the bass when it came to competitive shooter games, where it took some vital information away from me when I was trying to track for certain people on certain sounds on certain grounds, because some sounds have more of those bass notes when they're like walking around in those different textures, and it wasn't very present, surprisingly, when I was using these protein leather pads. But with the suede pads, it was there. So if you're playing competitive shooters, I'd actually recommend using the suede pads. They just did better and they sound nicer for that. I liked them a lot for that. I do think that there were some moments where these things did struggle a bit, especially when the sounds were behind you and above you, which is pretty common when it comes to headphones and stuff like that. But I think because of how well these headphones did for, like, you know, imaging around me, in front of me, and beside me, it was surprising to see it struggle a little bit when it came to sounds that were like a little bit more behind me and above me. I was definitely caught by people behind me more often than I'd like, so it wasn't exactly perfect for those situations. Now then, when it comes to non-competitive games, those things that I mentioned that were a problem when it came to the side stage being realistic is actually nice, because it gives that more realistic experience, and that makes that experience more immersive. So in non-competitive games, I think these guys sounded really, really good. For these type of games, I would recommend suede pads. Just sounds better. I was playing some games and I'm using a big guy. He's got some bass in his steps. With these pads, you can hear it. There's some weight. It feels good. Feels realistic. With the protein leather pads, the weight of that sound is taken away, and it's just not as pleasing. And it kind of takes me out of the moment a little bit, maybe because I'm also analyzing the sound. But still, it's just not as good. So, non-competitive games, all the problems I mentioned about the soundstage being kind of large and not giving you an edge in competitive shooters, great for these types of games because it gives you that more immersive, realistic experience. So, I think for those games, man, these things are ideal as long as you're using these pads. All right, now so far this sounds all fine and dandy. Like, this is great for gaming. However, there are some issues. This is designed for audiophiles, so this cable is ridiculously long, very long. I've cut it, I've not cut it, but you know, I'm holding it into two. You know, I've split it here, I'm holding it here. It's like nearly my wingspan. This is a very, very long cable, 10 feet of cable, I'd say, and that is too long for most people, even people who listen to music, but even more so if you're a gamer. So that's a little not very ergonomic. I know it's a nice quality cable, but I'll be damned, it's long as hell. Now, another caveat for these guys, especially if you're a gamer who isn't like too into like audiophile kind of stuff, is that these things are kind of high impedance. These things have an impedance of 350 ohms. So whatever you plug these things into has to be a higher quality source that gives more power. So you're gonna need an amp. Whatever you're plugging them into needs to have that ability to give it more juice, or you're gonna expect to have to turn up your volume a little higher than you normally would on your volume meters or volume dials, or whatever you're plugging it into. They do make a lower impedance version of these headphones, but I don't know how these sound. I will send the higher impedance one. So with that higher impedance, it's, you know, it sounds really good. I will say that, but because of that, you may need a better audio source to plug them into. So there is that caveat. So aside from the being high impedance and this ridiculously long cable, I think they're really good for gaming, but that would depend on when it comes to if you actually want them or not. Because despite the fact that I do think the sound of these guys punch well above their belt, these things still cost $300, and that is a lot of money to be paying for headphones for a regular gamer. For someone who is an audiophile and a gamer, it seems fine, especially with the sound that these guys are pushing out. I think it's a great price, but if you're just a gamer and you're looking for a headset, you probably wouldn't be looking at these. However, maybe you could be convinced. Now, honestly though, I do think these are a pretty solid set, and I can imagine people who like don't want to spend too much for an end game would find these neat, like basically end game tier. But for someone like me who asked for a lot, if they cleaned up the highs like I mentioned before, then these definitely would hit that mark pretty good, being a really good budget end game tier if that's a thing. Though I will mention that if you plan to go this route, it is a very expensive route to make your sound better, but that's the cost that you're going to have to pay for really good sound, because headphones aren't the only things you need when it comes to having good sound once you hit those upper levels. That's just the world of audiophiles, which is very expensive, much like the keyboard hobby, which I'm also into, and I'm trying not to dive too much into because it's also a very expensive hobby. You pay a lot of money to get closer and closer to perfection. So if you do like them, link in the description if you want to purchase them, because this is how they are. Just, you know, like I say for some of my other videos, know your preference in music, know what you like, know what you enjoy, and that's what will lead you to what you need. While I do want to recommend headphones to people and earbuds to people, I can't really tell if you're actually going to like them, because sound is very subjective. It's hard for me to say this is perfect for you. Just putting that out there. Know what you want. You know, I'm starting to ramble. Like I said, this video just got long. I told you this would happen. I talk too much. See you guys next time, I guess.